Today we're going to be making a basic pie dough, also known as pâte brisée. This will make 2 pie crusts using flour, salt, sugar, butter, and iced water. Our first method is going to be by hand using minimal equipment. We're going to need a bowl, measuring cups, our flour, our butter, salt, sugar, measuring spoons, and our iced water. We'll begin by scaling 2½ cups of all-purpose flour. We can scoop the flour into the cup and then level the cup off. 2½ cups. Then next we're going to add in our teaspoon each of salt and sugar. You can eliminate the sugar if you're making a savory dish. Then we're going to weigh our butter. We need 8 ounces of cubed butter. So in order to make a basic pie dough, you need to incorporate the butter into the flour before adding any liquid. So we can do this a number of ways. I like to use a potato masher. It allows me to break up the butter into smaller pieces and incorporate it into the flour. You can also use 2 forks. This one takes a little bit longer, takes a little more time, so I don't prefer it. You can also use a pastry blender, but I don't actually have one at home. So the last resort is using your hands. The only concern about using your hands is that your hands will warm up the butter. So I use a combination of both my hands and the potato masher. Worked out fine for me for this recipe. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to continue to break up the butter until it resembles pea-sized pieces. So this will take just a few minutes, but you want this to incorporate into the flour. And if you notice as I continue to mix my butter into my flour, here those are a little too big, so we're going to keep going. As I continue to mix my butter into the flour, the flour actually is going to start to take on the color of the butter. So you'll notice it goes from being bright white to almost like a slight yellowish color. So I'm going to continue to mix this in, just kind of breaking it up with my hands. If I need the help of the potato masher, I'll stop and use that. And I'm looking for those small pea-sized pieces. All right. So once I have gotten to the size that I want, those pea-sized pieces are going to cause the flakiness in my crust. So that's why I want to make sure that they are not too small, but still large enough to add flakiness or layers into my crust. As it bakes, the butter will melt and the water will create steam, which creates that flakiness. So here we are adding our iced water. We're going to add in 1/4 cup first and see how it mixes together. We kind of have to also bring our hands into the mix here to really bring it together and see how the water is absorbing the liquid. The humidity in your kitchen might play a role as to how much water you need to add to the recipe. Also the temperature of the butter and the dough. So I'm going to start with the smallest amount, which is that 1/4 cup, and then I'm going to add it in a tablespoon at a time until I get the proper consistency. Too much water is actually going to cause my dough to shrink back when it bakes. So we want to make sure we have the proper amount here. And at this point, we're just going to squeeze all of the dry scrap pieces of dough together, and we're going to break this into 2 even portions. I always like to weigh everything to make sure I have the same size, so here I'm just going to weigh and make sure that each half of the dough, I think weighs about 10 ounces each, 10 to 11 ounces. So now I'm going to form that into a round piece, nice and flat, so it's easier for me to roll it later on. I keep it nice even thickness so that it softens up at the right temperature when I go to roll it, and then right now I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap. And I'm going to put it in my fridge for at least 30 minutes until the dough sets back up and the butter gets cold again. Our next method is using a food processor. So this is much faster, but it does require you to have a food processor, which is an expensive piece of equipment. So again, we're going to start off with those 2½ cups of flour right into our food processor. To that, we're going to add our sugar and our salt. Salt always needs to be added, sugar is optional. I'm going to add my 8 ounces of butter in, and I'm going to put the top on, and I'm going to start to pulse this. So the action that I was doing before by hand is actually happening in the machine, making it into the nice finer pieces, and it goes much, much faster if you have a food processor in the house. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our water. Again, starting off with the smallest amount. and I'm going to follow the last recipe where I did a 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon, and I'm going to pulse it together until the dough starts to form. Now, because the food processor did not create as much heat as my hands did, I'm going to actually need just a little bit more water for this recipe. So here I'm going to add again in by tablespoon because I don't want to add too much water. And you can start to see the dough starts to come together. So at this point, I'm going to take the dough out and I'm going to work it by hand because I don't want to add too much water in, but there might be enough moisture in the product. So I'm going to start to squeeze it together by hand, and you can see how easily now the dough comes together. So again, I'm going to divide my dough into 2 equal portions. And if I need to take some back, just grab it from the other piece. And now again, we're going to flatten this into round discs, and we're going to wrap it in plastic wrap. Again, flattening it round allows us to roll it out easier into the final shape that we need for our final product. There you go. And we're going to be making some apple pies, blueberry ham pies, chicken pot pie, and quiche with this dough. So please make sure you subscribe to our channel to see more of those recipes. Thank you.